Standard 1.3, its D criteria for, calls for staying current with research that supports improved student learning outcomes, including findings from the learning sciences. A scholarly article I read regarding piano pedagogy was entitled Digital Listening Tools to Facilitate Children's Self-Regulation of Instrumental Music Practice. It was written by Lydia Wan, Renee Crawford, and Louise Jenkins. Its digital object identifier can be seen at the bottom of this slide. This paper was published in the Journal of Research in Music Education, a quarterly peer-reviewed journal of original research about music pedagogy and study. The research studied the effects of using an unnamed app to allow piano students to listen to the music they were studying in an attempt to improve self-regulation, identifying their own mistakes in practice, and correcting those mistakes independently. I have chosen to implement a similar app in my piano class to help my students listen to scales they are learning this semester. The app I implemented is called Piano Chords and Scales by Sincere Apps SIA. This is an app that does many different things, but the feature that I am most interested in is the ability for my students to listen to the scales they are learning to self-identify if they are playing the notes correctly. Here are some of my students engaging with the app during the individual practice time they were given in class. Several of the students were practicing their scales for an upcoming test. Initially, the week I introduced it, only a few students actively engaged with the app. However, after they were successful with their assessment, other students started using the app as well. At present, nearly all of my students actively engage with the app when learning new scales. On this slide, you can see the student grades for our first 3 scales assessments prior to the introduction of the app. The first scales assessment was a fairly easy assessment as there were no accidentals in the scale. However, starting with the second scales assessment, accidentals are introduced to the scales, making the assessments more difficult. The second and third assessments were not as successful as I would have liked. However, on this slide, you can see that after I introduced the app, the students began to use it and their scores improved by over 10 points. Also, some students went back to retest the previous scales and showed dramatically better results. By our 5th scale assessment, the students were showing over a 20-point increase. The minor scale was a fairly easy scale, but not easier than our first scales assessment. However, with the introduction of the app, the student achievement rate on the minor scale is significantly higher than the initial scale's success rate and is still fairly higher even after student reassessment.